What's that story you've never been able to tell?
I found out when I was 28 that my dad's side of the family had been in the witness protection program my entire life, and that their names were not what I had been told.
Jesus, what are they hiding from?
My grandma was part of a major drug bust in the 80s that ended up involving the entire family, and they had to move cross-country and change names. When I was in kindergarten, I fell asleep on the bus to school. No one woke me up. I wake up eventually and the bus is empty. I panic, as any 5-year-old does, and run to the front of the bus and try the door. It's locked. It was parked in a KFC parking lot, so people were coming in and out of the building. I started wailing with terror, banging on the glass doors, snot pouring down my face and into my mouth as people walk by and point at me. They mumbled and got into their car and left. By the time the bus driver finally came back out with her chicken meal, the entire door was covered in my slobber and tears. She instructed me how to open the closed door so she didn't have to put her meal down. I was still freaking out obviously and didn't understand. So she sighed, put her food down and finally opened the door and asked me what was I doing there. She called the school and drove me there, still covered in snot. I remember walking into my class with everyone standing in a line and hugging me one at a time. After that day, they made a rule for all bus drivers to get up and walk the bus front to back to make sure no kids get left sleeping. I nearly died at work. I was removing the main supply 200 volts 3P wire on the machine we just successfully overhauled. The problem is, I wasn't aware that the main circuit breaker was still turned on. I already had the gut feeling to check the breaker, but I was stubborn and proceeded to remove the wires. As I removed the second wire, I accidentally short-circuited it, creating a huge spark right in front of my eyes. First thing I did was to check my hand, which was thankfully unharmed, but had visible dark spots due to the strong electric current on the short-circuiting of the wires. Good thing I was half-conscious and went on to turn off the main circuit breaker. Some of my workmates saw and approached me while asking if everything was all right. After removing the wire, I took a walk and had a deep thought what might happen to me if those wires touched me. I might have suffered a severe third-degree burn, or lose a limb, or died from electrocution. Folks, always be careful and always trust your gut feeling. I moved to the UK from Zimbabwe when I was 4. The first few years my parents spent their whole time trying to settle down. By the time I was 8 they realized we had never been to London. So on a hot June day we went into London. We went to the aquarium, Covent Garden to see all the performers, on the London Eye. It was a good day. To end the day we went to Buckingham Palace. I was tired so I was resting my head against the bars asking all the questions you'd expect from an 8-year-old. After a while my parents said it was time to go. I pushed away from the bars and then felt the cold steel against the back of my ears. I hadn't noticed my head has slipped through. I panicked, a crowd gathered, I'm probably in many a family photo album, even a horse guard came to see what the commission was about, bet he wasn't expecting a child with his head stuck. By then I had accepted this as my new home, but I couldn't figure out how I'd go to sleep with a spike on the floor. Luckily an old lady had a tub of Vaseline in her handbag and my dad was able to pull me out with my head smothered in Vaseline. 2014 It was my first night in college. My roommates, strangers, didn't show up. We lived in a 3-story apartment complex, with 4 apartments each level in a freshman building. Well, the neighbors are partying and I get out of my comfort zone and walk outside. Outside, some guys are drinking and one of the guys invites me in to party and so begins my college experience. Lo and behold, I get wasted just like many of the others. I head back to my apartment on the same level and the party has moved slightly to my apartment, but there are just like 6 people there. I start asking people to leave as I'm going to bed, but I'm so drunk, I know I don't care if they stay or go. I go to my room and there is a guy crashed in it. I tell him he doesn't need to leave, but please move over and he does. I wake up and freak out because I have a boyfriend. I check to make sure we didn't have sex. No, but you came into my apartment asking everyone to leave and told me I could stay in your bed and hopped in. Confused, I ask him to clarify. Dude, this isn't your apartment. took about 30 seconds to realize I just arrived at the wrong apartment and slept in a stranger's bed, my first night in college. About 6 months ago, I was very close to suicide. I actually was about to do it. Thinking about killing myself, and at one point I had agreed to myself I would end it. I got home that night and it was just me and my cat as my fiancée was at work. My cat, I think she knew I was sad, and she never sits in people's laps, sat up in my lap and proceeded to flip on her belly and play wrestle with my hand. I broke down for about 3 hours. My fiancée came home knowing none the wiser, but had brought my favorite dish from her work brewery, cause she knew I was feeling down. I've never told her that was the night I decided not to pull the trigger. The time my mum needed to go back into the house to get a scarf. Because of this we were held back and missed a bus by 10 seconds. That bus then crashed into a bridge at very high speed because the bus driver had mental health problems. It is the closest I have ever been to death. I will never complain about my mum going back to get a scarf in my life again. The night my son was born, my wife lost a lot of blood. In an instant, our delivery room was filled with 25 medical personnel after a rapid response call. My wife was white as a ghost and hardly coherent. I stood beside her holding her hand while she received emergency blood and plasma and platelets. I was in total shock in the moment, until my wife locked eyes with me and asked, "Am I dying?" I lost it. I'm losing it now typing this. It was the scariest moment of my entire life and I really have trouble reliving it. 8 months later, wife and baby are happy and healthy. Give birth in hospitals. You never know what can go wrong, and the staff there saved her life that night.